Imagine this: a pregnant woman in a lavish mansion discovers her millionaire husband's dark secret during a routine ultrasound text from his mistress flashing on his phone. What starts as heartbreak spirals into a nightmare of bruises, betrayal, financial sabotage, and a ruthless campaign to destroy her life and steal their unborn child. But here's the twist: she fights back, uncovering a web of fraud, abuse, and hidden crimes that could topple an empire. Will she survive, or will the powerful forces against her win? Stay tuned for this gripping true story of resilience, revenge, and ultimate justice. You won't believe how it ends. If you're hooked, hit that like button. Drop a comment with your thoughts. Share this with someone who needs inspiration, and subscribe for more empowering tales. Let's dive in. The marble bathroom felt cold against Sofia Martinez's bare feet as she stood before the mirror at 3 in the morning. Rain pounded against the windows of their $3 million mansion, creating a symphony of chaos that matched the storm in her heart. Her hands trembled as she examined the purple bruises wrapping around her wrists like a twisted bracelet. 7 months pregnant and 38 years old, Sophia had never imagined she would become that woman. The woman who hides bruises. The woman who makes excuses. The woman who whispers to herself in empty bathrooms while her millionaire husband sleeps peacefully in their king-size bed. "I never thought I would be that woman," she whispered to her reflection, her voice barely audible above the storm outside. The phone in her hands felt heavy as she opened the camera app. The flash illuminated the bruises in stark detail, creating evidence of a truth she was finally ready to face. This pregnant wife had been betrayed in ways she was only beginning to understand. But let's go back to where it all began to unravel. Just 12 hours earlier, Sophia had been living what everyone believed was the perfect life. She woke up at 6:30 that Tuesday morning, her routine as polished as the marble countertops in their gourmet kitchen. Richard Blackwood, her husband of 8 years, preferred his breakfast at exactly 7:15. 2 eggs over easy, whole grain toast cut diagonally, fresh orange juice, and coffee with 1 sugar cube. Sophia had given up her marketing career 6 years ago when they started trying for a baby. After years of fertility struggles, expensive treatments, and heartbreak, this pregnancy felt like a miracle. At 38, she finally had everything she had dreamed of: a loving husband, financial security, and a baby on the way. As she prepared Richard's breakfast, her hand instinctively moved to her rounded belly. Their daughter would be born in just 2 months. They had already painted the nursery a soft lavender and chosen the name Isabella. Sophia spent hours reading What to Expect When You're Expecting, highlighting every page, preparing for motherhood with the same dedication she once brought to marketing campaigns. "Good morning, beautiful," Richard said, entering the kitchen in his perfectly pressed suit. At 45, he was still the charming tech millionaire who had swept her off her feet at a conference 9 years ago. His company, Black Tech Solutions, was about to go public, making them even wealthier than they already were. "Morning, honey," Sophia replied, serving his breakfast with the smile that had become second nature. "Don't forget we have the 20-week ultrasound today at 2. Richard paused, his fork halfway to his mouth. "The what?" "The ultrasound," Sophia repeated, trying to hide her disappointment. "We're finding out if Isabella is healthy. Remember, we've been planning this for weeks." "Right. Of course." He glanced at his phone, frowning. "I might be a few minutes late. The IPO meeting is running longer than expected." This was nothing new. Richard's company always came first, but Sophia had learned to accept it. After all, his success provided the life they lived. The house, the cars, the security. She told herself it was worth the loneliness. At 2:15 that afternoon, Sophia sat alone in the waiting room of Dr. Williams' office, watching other couples share the excitement of seeing their babies for the first time. She had called Richard twice, both calls going straight to voicemail. "Mrs. Blackwood." The nurse called her name, and Sophia followed her into the examination room, her heart heavy with familiar disappointment. Richard burst through the door just as Dr. Williams began the ultrasound. Sorry," He panted, sliding into the chair beside the examination table. Traffic was horrible. Sophia squeezed his hand as the doctor moved the wand across her gel-covered belly. The room filled with the rapid, whooshing sound of their daughter's heartbeat. "There she is," Dr. Williams announced, pointing to the screen. "Everything looks perfect. Strong heartbeat. Good size. No abnormalities detected." Tears of joy streamed down Sophia's face as she watched their daughter move on the screen. This was the moment she had dreamed of for years. She turned to share the joy with Richard, but he was staring at his phone, which had just lit up with a text message. The preview was visible from where Sophia sat. "Can't wait to feel you inside me again. Miss you so much, baby. E." The world stopped. The heartbeat on the monitor seemed to slow. The joy drained from Sophia's body like water from a broken vessel. "Richard," she whispered, but he was already sliding the phone into his pocket. "What?" he asked, looking up with the same charming smile he had given her every morning for 8 years. "Who's E?" The question fell from her lips before she could stop it. "Dr." Williams cleared his throat uncomfortably. "I'll give you two a moment," he said, stepping out of the room. Richard's face hardened. "What are you talking about?" "The text message. I saw it." Sophia's voice was stronger now, fueled by a surge of adrenaline that had nothing to do with pregnancy hormones. "You're being paranoid. Sophia. It was a work message." But even as he spoke, his phone buzzed again. This time he was quicker, but not quick enough. Sophia caught a glimpse of a name she didn't recognize: Elena Cross. The rest of the appointment passed in a blur. Dr. Williams returned, printed pictures of the ultrasound, and congratulated them on their healthy baby girl. Sophia nodded and smiled, but inside something fundamental had shifted. The perfect life she thought she was living had developed its first crack. In the parking lot, as rain began to fall, Sophia pulled out her own phone and searched for Elena Cross on social media. What she found made her stomach lurch. Elena Cross was 28 years old, beautiful in a way that Sophia had once been before pregnancy weight and stretch marks. She was Richard's executive assistant, according to her LinkedIn profile. Her Instagram was full of expensive dinners, designer clothes, and photos taken in locations that Sophia recognized. The rooftop bar where she and Richard had celebrated their anniversary last month. The exclusive restaurant where he claimed to have business dinners. The hotel lobby where his company supposedly held client meetings. Elena Cross had been living Sophia's life in parallel, and Sophia had been too trusting, too comfortable, too naive to see it. The pregnant wife betrayed by her millionaire husband sat in her luxury SUV in the doctor's parking lot, staring at photos of the other woman, feeling her perfect world crumble around her. The rain on the windshield blurred her vision, or maybe those were tears. She couldn't tell anymore. As she drove home through the storm, Sophia's mind raced with questions she was afraid to have answered. How long had this been going on? Did Elena know about the baby? Did Richard love her? Had he ever really loved Sophia? Or had she been nothing more than a placeholder until someone better came along? The mansion felt different when she walked through the front door. The marble floors that once spoke of success now felt cold and unwelcoming. The expensive artwork on the walls seemed to mock her. Even the nursery door, painted with little flowers she had so carefully chosen, felt like a reminder of her foolishness. Sophia spent the afternoon in a haze, going through the motions of her daily routine while her world shifted beneath her feet. She made Richard's favorite dinner, set the table with their wedding china, and waited for him to come home so they could discuss their daughter's ultrasound. Instead, she would confront him about Elena Cross. Richard arrived home at 8:30, claiming the IPO meetings had run late. He kissed Sophia's cheek, complimented the dinner, and asked about the baby as if nothing had changed. "The doctor said everything looks perfect," Sophia replied, serving him the salmon she had prepared. "But I think we need to talk about something else." Richard looked up from his plate, and for just a moment, Sophia saw something flicker in his eyes. Fear, guilt. What about Elena Cross? The name hung in the air between them like a loaded weapon. Richard's fork clattered against his plate, and his face went through a series of expressions before settling on defensive anger. What about her? She's my assistant. Is that all she is? Sophia kept her voice calm, though her heart was pounding so hard she was sure he could hear it. Of course that's all she is. What are you implying? I saw the text messages. Richard, I saw her Instagram. She's been to all the places you told me were business meetings. Richard stood up so quickly his chair scraped against the floor. You've been spying on me going through my phone. The message popped up during the ultrasound. I didn't go through anything. It was right there. You're being paranoid and jealous. This is exactly why I didn't want to hire a female assistant. But Elena is the best at what she does. The gaslighting was textbook, but Sophia had read enough about emotional manipulation in her therapy books to recognize it. Still, the seed of doubt he was trying to plant found fertile ground in her insecurities. Then show me your phone, she said quietly. Absolutely not. I have confidential business information on there. The fact that you would even ask shows how little you trust me. The fact that you won't show me shows how little I should. That's when it happened. Richard's mask of charm slipped completely, revealing something ugly underneath. He crossed the dining room in 3 quick steps and grabbed Sophia's wrist, his fingers digging into her skin with enough force to leave marks. You're being a paranoid, hormonal mess, he hissed, his face inches from hers. Elena is my assistant, nothing more, and if you keep acting like a crazy person, you're going to damage our marriage and hurt our daughter. The pain in her wrist was sharp, but the pain in her heart was sharper. This was not the man she had married. This was not the father she wanted for her daughter. You're hurting me, she whispered. Richard looked down at his hand wrapped around her wrist and released her so quickly she stumbled backward. The look of shock on his face suggested he was as surprised by his actions as she was. Sophia, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. The stress from the IPO, the late nights, I'm not myself lately. But as he spoke, his phone buzzed again. This time he grabbed it immediately, but not before Sophia saw Elena's name flash across the screen. I need to take this, he said, walking toward his office. It's about the morning presentation. Sophia stood alone in their dining room, rubbing her wrist where his fingers had left their mark. The expensive chandelier cast shadows that seemed to dance mockingly around her. The home she had loved now felt like a prison. As Richard's voice drifted from his office, talking in hushed, intimate tones that he never used with business associates, Sophia made a decision that would change everything. She walked upstairs to their bedroom, took her phone from the nightstand, and Googled Jennifer Torres, her best friend from college who had become a successful divorce attorney. They hadn't spoken in months, but Jen had always told Sophia to call if she ever needed anything. It was time to make that call. But first, she needed evidence. Sophia opened her phone's camera and carefully photographed the bruises forming on her wrist. The purple marks stood out starkly against her pale skin, undeniable proof of what had just happened. As she saved the photos, Richard's laughter echoed from downstairs. He was still on the phone with Elena, and whatever she was saying was making him happier than Sophia had seen him in months. The pregnant wife betrayed by her millionaire husband sat on the edge of their marriage bed, looking at pictures of her own bruises, listening to her husband laugh with another woman. The heartbreaking family drama that would define the next chapter of her life was just beginning. Thunder crashed outside as if the universe was acknowledging the storm that was about to break over the Blackwood mansion. Sophia placed her hand over her belly, feeling their daughter move restlessly inside her. I won't let him hurt us, she whispered to the baby. I promise. But as she prepared to make the call that would destroy her marriage, Sophia had no idea how much deeper Richard's betrayal ran, or how far he would go to protect his secrets. The rain continued to fall, washing away the last remnants of the perfect life Sophia thought she had been living. The phone call to Jennifer Torres was scheduled for the next morning, but Sophia barely slept. She lay awake listening to Richard's steady breathing, wondering how many nights he had fallen asleep thinking about Elena instead of her. The bruises on her wrist had darkened overnight, a purple reminder of how quickly her husband could transform from charming millionaire to something far more dangerous. Richard left for work at his usual time, kissing Sophia's forehead with the same casual affection he had shown for years. But now she noticed how his eyes didn't quite meet hers, how his smile seemed practiced rather than genuine. "I'll be late tonight," he said, adjusting his tie in their bedroom mirror. "The legal team wants to go over the IPO documents one more time." "Of course they do," Sophia replied, her voice carefully neutral. After he left, Sophia poured herself a cup of herbal tea and settled into the living room with her laptop. She had 8 hours before Richard returned, 8 hours to gather information and prepare for whatever came next. Elena Cross's social media profiles painted a picture of a woman living a life of luxury that should have been impossible on an assistant's salary. Designer handbags, expensive jewelry, first-class travel. The timeline was damning. Elena had started working for Richard 18 months ago, and the expensive lifestyle had begun shortly after. But it was the location tags that truly broke Sophia's heart. Elena had been to their vacation home in the Hamptons, posting photos from the deck overlooking the ocean, where Sophia had spent countless weekends dreaming of bringing their future children. She had been to the private restaurant where Richard had proposed, sitting at what looked like the same table. Elena Cross wasn't just Richard's mistress. She was living an alternate version of Sophia's life. Sophia was so absorbed in her investigation that she almost missed the sound of a car in the driveway. Panic shot through her as she quickly closed the laptop, but it wasn't Richard's BMW. It was a delivery truck. The package was addressed to Richard from a jewelry store Sophia recognized. She had purchased her wedding ring there 8 years ago. Inside was a receipt for a diamond necklace worth $15,000, purchased just 3 days ago. Sophia had received no jewelry for their anniversary last month, no gifts for successfully reaching the 20-week mark in their pregnancy. But Elena Cross had posted a photo on Instagram yesterday wearing a diamond necklace that looked remarkably similar to the one described on the receipt. The evidence was mounting, but Sophia needed more. She needed to understand exactly what she was dealing with before she made any moves. She spent the afternoon binge-watching episodes of The Good Wife, finding an odd comfort in Alicia Florrick's journey from naive political wife to independent woman. Like Alicia, Sophia was discovering that the man she had trusted with her life had been living a lie. At 3 o'clock, her phone rang. The caller ID showed Richard's office number, but the voice that answered was definitely not Richard's. "Mrs. Blackwood, this is Elena Cross, Mr. Blackwood's assistant. I'm calling to confirm your husband's dinner meeting tonight with the Japanese investors. He wanted me to let you know he'll be very late." Sophia's grip tightened on the phone. Elena's voice was younger than she had expected, with a slight southern accent that made her sound sweet and innocent. Nothing like the calculating woman Sophia was beginning to understand her to be. "Of course," Sophia replied, proud of how steady her voice sounded. "Thank you for calling, Elena." "Oh, you're so welcome, Mrs. Blackwood. I hope you're feeling well. Mr. Blackwood mentioned you're expecting. How exciting." The casual mention of her pregnancy felt like a slap. Elena knew about the baby. She knew about everything. "Yes, very exciting," Sophia managed. "Well, I'll let you go. Take care now." Aha! The call ended, but Sophia stared at her phone for several minutes afterward. Elena Cross was bold. She would give her that. Calling the wife to provide an alibi for her own affair took a special kind of audacity. That evening, Sophia found herself standing in her bedroom, staring at the bed she shared with Richard. Had he brought Elena here? Had she slept in this bed? Used Sophia's bathroom? Worn Sophia's robe? The thought made her sick, but it also made her angry. And anger, Sophia was discovering, was much more useful than heartbreak. So, at 8 o'clock that evening, she drove to Elena's apartment. Elena Cross lived in a luxury high-rise downtown, the kind of place that cost more per month than most people made in a year. Sophia parked across the street and waited, feeling like a character in one of the crime dramas she used to watch before Richard decided they were too violent for a pregnant woman. At 9:30, Richard's BMW pulled into the building's valet parking. Sophia watched through her windshield as her husband stepped out of the car, straightened his tie, and walked into Elena's building like he belonged there. The Japanese investor dinner was clearly a fiction. Sophia sat in her car for another hour, watching the light in what she assumed was Elena's apartment window. At 10:45, the light went out, and Sophia drove home alone, crying for the first time since this nightmare had begun. Richard returned home at 1 in the morning, slipping into bed beside Sophia as quietly as possible. She pretended to be asleep, but every fiber of her being was aware of his presence. He smelled different. Perfume that wasn't hers clung to his skin. The next morning brought fresh horrors. Sophia was making coffee when she noticed something on the kitchen island that hadn't been there the day before: a small, silver earring. The same style of earring that Elena wore in her Instagram photos. The same earrings that had been featured in the jewelry store receipt, purchased as a set with the diamond necklace. Richard had been careless, or maybe he wanted to be caught. Either way, Sophia now had physical evidence of Elena's presence in their home, but the worst was yet to come. As Sophia was putting the earring in a plastic bag, preserving it like evidence at a crime scene, her phone rang. The caller ID showed Elena's number. "Hello, Mrs. Blackwood." Elena's sweet voice chimed through the speaker. "I hope I'm not calling too early." "Not at all," Sophia replied, though her hands were shaking. "I wanted to talk to you about Richard, about your husband." Sophia's heart stopped. "What about him?" "Well, this is a little awkward, but I think you deserve to know the truth. Richard and I have been seeing each other for quite some time now, and the situation has become rather complicated." The boldness of it took Sophia's breath away. Elena was calling to confess to the affair, as if she were doing Sophia a favor. "Complicated how?" Sophia managed to ask. "I'm pregnant, Mrs. Blackwood, with Richard's child." The world tilted sideways. Sophia gripped the kitchen counter to keep from falling, her free hand instinctively moving to protect her own belly. "That's impossible," she whispered. "I'm afraid it's not. I'm about 6 months along. Actually, Richard hasn't told you because he doesn't want to stress you during your own pregnancy, but I thought you had a right to know." 6 months. Elena had been pregnant for 6 months, which meant the affair had been going on for at least 7 or 8 months. While Sophia was struggling with morning sickness and celebrating finally getting pregnant, Richard was creating another family with another woman. "Why are you telling me this?" Sophia asked, surprised she could still speak. "Because Richard is planning to leave you after your baby is born. He doesn't want the drama of a divorce to affect his IPO, but once the company goes public and the money is secured, he's going to file for divorce and marry me. I thought you deserved time to prepare." Elena's voice remained sweet and concerned, as if she were delivering weather forecasts instead of destroying someone's life. "He's also been moving money offshore," Elena continued. "Swiss accounts, investment properties in the Caribbean, places where you won't be able to touch them in a divorce. But don't worry, he'll make sure you and your daughter are taken care of. He's not a monster, Mrs. Blackwood." But he was a monster, Sophia realized. They both were. "I have to go," Sophia said. "Of course. I just wanted you to know that this isn't personal. You seem like a lovely woman, and Richard speaks of you fondly. It's just that sometimes people grow apart, and—" Sophia hung up the phone. She stood in her kitchen, surrounded by the trappings of her perfect life, feeling like a stranger in her own home. The woman she had been 24 hours ago, the trusting wife, the grateful mother-to-be, the woman who believed in happy endings had died with Elena's phone call. The woman who remained was someone harder, someone who understood that her husband and his mistress had been planning her downfall for months. They had calculated her destruction with the same precision Richard used to run his company. But they had made one crucial mistake. They had underestimated Sophia Martinez Blackwood. The pregnant wife, betrayed by her millionaire husband, sat down at her kitchen table and opened her laptop. She pulled up Jennifer Torres's law firm website and filled out the contact form, requesting an emergency consultation. Then she opened a new document and began typing everything she could remember about Richard's finances, his business dealings, his travel schedule, and his relationship with Elena Cross. If they wanted to play games, she would learn the rules. But first, she would gather evidence. Real evidence, not just photographs of bruises and Instagram posts. Sofia Martinez had spent 6 years being the perfect homemaker, but she had been a marketing executive for 12 years before that. She knew how to research, how to investigate, and how to build a case. The heartbreaking family drama was about to become a war, and Sofia intended to win. As she typed, her daughter kicked restlessly inside her, as if she could sense the change in her mother's body chemistry. The stress hormones, the adrenaline, the determination that was replacing despair. "It's okay, baby," Sofia whispered, rubbing her belly. "Mommy's going to protect us. Both of us." But even as she made that promise, Sofia had no idea how far Richard and Elena would go to protect their own interests, or how much more her world would need to crumble before she could begin to rebuild it. The game had begun, and Sofia was playing catch-up, but she was also playing for the highest stakes possible, her daughter's future and her own survival. Jennifer Torres hadn't changed much in the 6 years since Sofia had last seen her. Still sharp, still fierce, still the kind of woman who wore her power like designer armor. They met at a discreet cafe downtown, far from Richard's usual haunts and the society circles where news of their meeting might travel back to him. "You look tired," Jen said without preamble, sliding into the booth across from Sofia. "I haven't slept in 3 days," Sofia admitted, unconsciously rubbing the faded bruises on her wrist. Jen's eyes immediately focused on the gesture. "Show me." Sofia pulled back her sleeve, revealing the purple marks that had deepened to an ugly yellow-green around the edges. Jen photographed them with her phone, her expression growing darker with each shot. "How long has he been physical with you?" "That was the first time, at least, the first time he left marks. There were other times." Sofia thought about the moments over the years when Richard's grip on her arm had been a little too tight, when his hands on her shoulders had felt more controlling than affectionate. Moments she had dismissed as stress or passion. "Maybe. I don't know. I never thought of it as abuse until now." Emotional abuse often escalates to physical abuse, especially during times of stress. Like when a wife discovers an affair. Jen pulled out a legal pad and began taking notes as Sofia recounted everything: Elena's phone call, the jewelry receipts, the offshore accounts. The pregnancy timeline that revealed the affair had been going on for months. "This Elena woman called you directly?" Jen asked, her pen pausing mid-sentence. "She acted like she was doing me a favor, like she was the concerned other woman looking out for the naive wife. That's psychological warfare. Sofia, she's trying to break you down mentally before the legal battle even begins. The fact that she knows about the offshore accounts suggests she's been helping Richard hide assets. Can we prove that? We'll try. But first, we need to secure your position. Richard doesn't know you're aware of the full scope of his deception, right?" "I don't think so." "Good. That gives us an advantage, but not for long. I need you to go home and act normal while I start building our case." "Can you do that?" Sofia nodded, though the thought of pretending everything was fine made her stomach churn. "I'm going to file for temporary restraining order based on the domestic violence, and will request immediate spousal support and exclusive use of the marital home." "But Sofia, I need you to understand something. This is going to get ugly. Richard has money and power, and men like him don't go down without a fight." That afternoon, Sofia returned home to find Richard in the kitchen, preparing what looked like a romantic dinner: candles, flowers, her favorite pasta dish, and a bottle of non-alcoholic wine for her pregnancy. "What's all this?" she asked, genuinely confused. "I've been thinking about our conversation the other night, and you're right. I haven't been present enough during your pregnancy. The IPO stress has made me a terrible husband." Richard's charm was in full force, the same magnetic personality that had swept her off her feet 9 years ago. For a moment, Sophia almost believed him. Almost. "I've made us reservations at Piccolo Romano next Friday," he continued, naming the Italian restaurant where they had had their first date. "Just like when we first met. We can talk about baby names, plan the nursery, maybe even discuss that trip to Italy you've always wanted." The reference to Italy hit its target. Sophia had been dreaming of visiting Italy since college, inspired by reading Eat, Pray, Love. It was one of those someday dreams that married life and career had pushed to the back burner. "That sounds wonderful," Sophia heard herself saying. Richard smiled and pulled her into his arms, his hands resting gently on her belly. "I love you, Sophia. I love our family. I know I haven't shown it lately, but this IPO will change everything. We'll have more time together, more freedom to be the family we've always wanted to be." For just a moment, standing in her husband's arms with candlelight flickering around them, Sophia allowed herself to imagine that Elena Cross had been lying, that the jewelry receipts had innocent explanations, that the bruises on her wrist were an aberration brought on by stress. But then Richard's phone buzzed, and she felt him tense against her. "Don't answer it," she said softly. "It might be important. Please, just this once. Let it go to voicemail." Richard hesitated, then kissed the top of her head. "You're right. Tonight is about us." They had dinner by candlelight, talking about baby names and nursery themes and the kind of life they wanted to give their daughter. Richard was attentive and charming, asking about her doctor's appointments and making plans for the weeks after the baby was born. It felt like falling in love all over again. But at 10 o'clock, just as Sophia was beginning to believe in the possibility of reconciliation, Richard's phone rang with a call he couldn't ignore. "It's the office," he said apologetically. "There's been a problem with the Tokyo presentation. I'll make it quick." Sophia nodded and began clearing the dinner dishes. But Richard's end of the conversation was impossible to ignore. "I can't tonight. Something came up with Sophia." "No, I told you. We have to be careful until after the IPO. Elena, please, just give me a few more weeks." The fantasy shattered like crystal hitting marble. Sophia stood at the sink, her hands submerged in soapy water, listening to her husband make plans with his pregnant mistress, while the romantic dinner he had prepared for his wife grew cold on the table. When Richard returned to the kitchen, Sophia was loading the dishwasher with mechanical precision. "Sorry about that," he said. "Crisis averted." "I'm tired," Sophia replied without looking at him. "I think I'll go to bed early." "Of course. You need your rest." He kissed her goodnight as if the phone call had never happened, as if Elena Cross didn't exist, as if their marriage wasn't built on a foundation of lies. Sophia lay awake that night, feeling her daughter move restlessly inside her. At 2 in the morning, she got up to use the bathroom and found Richard's side of the bed empty. Through the window, she could see him in the garden, pacing back and forth while talking quietly into his phone. The reconciliation dinner had been theater. Nothing more. A performance designed to keep her calm and compliant while he continued his affair and his financial manipulations. But Sophia was done being an audience to her own betrayal. The next morning, Richard announced that he would be traveling to Boston for 3 days to meet with potential investors. Sophia helped him pack, playing the role of supportive wife while mentally cataloging every lie. "I'll miss you," she said, kissing him goodbye at the door. "I'll miss you too. Take care of our little girl." The BMW disappeared down their tree-lined driveway, and Sophia immediately called Jennifer Torres. "He's gone for 3 days," she reported. "Perfect. I'm coming over with a forensic accountant and a private investigator. We're going to document everything in that house." Within 2 hours, Sophia's home was filled with professionals who treated her marriage like a crime scene. They photographed financial documents, copied computer files, and searched for evidence of Richard's hidden assets. "Your husband is smart," the forensic accountant, David Kim, told Sophia, "but he's not as smart as he thinks he is. He's left a digital trail that we can follow." The private investigator, Maria Santos, focused on Elena Cross. "She's been living beyond her means for over a year," Maria reported. "Designer clothes, expensive car, luxury apartment, all paid for with cash or credit cards linked to accounts your husband controls. Can we prove he's been supporting her financially? We're working on it. But Sophia, there's something else you need to know. Elena Cross has been married before. Twice. Both marriages ended in expensive divorces, and both ex-husbands accused her of having affairs. Elena Cross wasn't just Richard's mistress. She was a professional mistress, someone who made a career out of destroying marriages for financial gain. There's more, Maria continued. Elena's pregnancy might not be Richard's child. What do you mean? She was seen with another man regularly until about 2 months ago, a married businessman who fits the same profile as your husband. Rich, older, naive. The revelation should have made Sophia feel better, but instead it made everything worse. If Elena was playing Richard the same way she was playing Sophia, then no one in this triangle was telling the truth. That evening, as Sophia sat alone in her living room, surrounded by evidence of her husband's betrayal, her phone rang. It was Richard, calling from Boston. "How are you feeling?" he asked, in his voice warm with apparent concern. "Fine. Tired, but fine. I miss you already. This trip feels longer than usual. When will you be home?" "Friday evening. We'll still have our dinner reservation at Piccolo Romano, won't we?" Sophia looked around her living room, where legal documents were scattered across every surface, evidence of the war she was about to declare on her marriage. "Of course," she said. "I can't wait." But as she spoke, severe pain shot through her abdomen, doubling her over. The stress, the adrenaline, the emotional trauma of the past week were taking their toll on her body. "Richard," she gasped, but the line had already gone dead. The pain intensified, and Sophia realized with growing panic that something was seriously wrong. She managed to call 911 before collapsing on the living room floor, surrounded by evidence of her husband's crimes, while their daughter fought for survival inside her. As the ambulance sirens grew louder, Sophia's last coherent thought was that Richard had no idea his perfect plan was about to be destroyed by the very stress his betrayal had created. The pregnant wife betrayed by her millionaire husband was about to lose everything she had left to lose, but she was also about to discover reserves of strength she never knew she possessed. Sophia woke up in the hospital to the sound of machines beeping steadily around her. The room was stark white, a harsh contrast to the warm colors of her home. A blood pressure cuff squeezed her arm rhythmically, and wires connected her to monitors that tracked both her heartbeat and the baby's. "Mrs. Blackwood." A nurse appeared at her bedside, checking the IV line in her hand. "How are you feeling?" "The baby," Sophia whispered, her hand immediately moving to her belly. "The baby is fine," the nurse assured her. "But your blood pressure spiked dangerously high. We're monitoring you both very closely." Dr. Williams entered the room, his face serious. "Sophia, we need to talk about stress management. Your blood pressure reached levels that could be dangerous for both you and the baby. What's been going on at home?" Before Sophia could answer, Richard burst through the door, still wearing his travel clothes and looking genuinely panicked. "Sophia, thank God. I got here as fast as I could." He rushed to her bedside, taking her hand in his. "The hospital called me in Boston. I've been terrified." For a moment, seeing the fear in his eyes, Sophia almost forgot about Elena Cross and the offshore accounts and the lies that had led to this moment. Almost. "I'm okay," she said softly. "What happened? Were you lifting something heavy? Did you fall?" Dr. Williams cleared his throat. "Mr. Blackwood, your wife's condition appears to be stress-related. Severe emotional trauma can cause dangerous spikes in blood pressure during pregnancy." Richard's eyes flicked to Sophia's face, and she saw the exact moment when understanding dawned. He knew that she knew. "I see," he said carefully. "Well, whatever's causing the stress, we'll eliminate it immediately. Sophia's health and the baby's health are the only things that matter." But even as he spoke the right words, Sophia could see him calculating, planning, trying to figure out how much she had discovered and how much damage control he would need to do. That night, while Richard slept in the uncomfortable hospital chair beside her bed, Sophia overheard him talking quietly on his phone in the hallway. "Elena, I can't talk about this right now. Sophia is in the hospital. Yes, it's stress-related, which means she knows something. I don't know how much. We need to accelerate our timeline. The IPO goes public in 6 weeks. After that, it won't matter what she knows." Sophia closed her eyes and pretended to sleep, but every word burned into her memory. They were planning to speed up whatever scheme they had been orchestrating, using her hospitalization as cover for their actions. When Richard returned to the room, he found Sophia's eyes open. "Can't sleep," he asked gently. "Just thinking about the baby. She's going to be fine. We're going to be fine. All of this stress will be over soon. I promise." But his promise felt more like a threat. The next morning, Jennifer Torres arrived at the hospital carrying a briefcase and wearing her most serious expression. "I need to speak with my client privately," she told Richard. "I don't think this is the time for business discussions," Richard replied, his charm sliding into place. "Sophia needs rest, not more stress. Actually, Mr. Blackwood, this conversation might reduce her stress significantly. Would you mind giving us a few minutes?" Richard hesitated, clearly not wanting to leave Sophia alone with an attorney, but he couldn't object without seeming suspicious. "I'll be right outside," he said, kissing Sophia's forehead before reluctantly leaving the room. "We have a problem," Jen said immediately after the door closed. "Richard filed for divorce yesterday." Sophia's heart rate monitor began beeping faster. "What?" "He's claiming that you've become emotionally unstable during the pregnancy and that he fears for his safety. He's requesting immediate custody of the unborn child and exclusive use of the marital home." "He can't do that. He's already done it, and there's more. He's frozen all your joint accounts, claiming you've been making suspicious large withdrawals. He's also obtained a restraining order against you, claiming you've been harassing Elena Cross." The machine monitoring the baby's heartbeat began alarming, and nurses rushed into the room. Sophia's blood pressure had spiked again, and the baby was showing signs of distress. "Everyone out," Dr. Williams ordered, pushing Jen and Richard from the room as medical staff surrounded Sophia's bed. For the next hour, Sophia lay perfectly still while doctors worked to stabilize her condition and monitor the baby. The stress of learning about Richard's preemptive legal strike had pushed her body to its limits. When she was finally stable, Dr. Williams approached her bed with a serious expression. "Sophia, I'm going to be direct with you. Whatever is happening in your personal life needs to be resolved immediately. Another episode like this could result in premature labor or other serious complications. I understand. I'm recommending complete bed rest for the remainder of your pregnancy. No stress, no drama, no major life decisions. Your body and your baby can't handle any more trauma." But as Dr. Williams spoke, Sophia could see Richard through the glass window, talking animatedly with a man in an expensive suit who could only be his attorney. They were planning their next move while she lay helpless in a hospital bed. That afternoon, a court officer arrived at the hospital with official papers. Richard's legal team had moved with military precision, filing motions and restraining orders designed to paint Sophia as an unstable woman who posed a danger to her unborn child. "Mrs. Blackwood," the officer said formally, "you're being served with divorce papers and a temporary restraining order. You're prohibited from contacting Mr. Blackwood except through attorneys, and you're prohibited from entering the marital home without supervision." Sophia took the papers with trembling hands. Her own home, the nursery she had so carefully prepared for their daughter, was now off limits to her. "Where am I supposed to go when I'm discharged?" "That's not my concern, ma'am. I'm just serving the papers." After the officer left, Sophia called her mother from the hospital phone. "Mom, I need help." Carmen Martinez had been waiting for this call for 8 years, ever since Sophia had married Richard Blackwood and gradually distanced herself from her family and friends. Carmen had never trusted Richard's charm, had always sensed something calculating beneath his perfect facade. "Pack nothing," Carmen said immediately. "I'm driving up from Phoenix tonight. You're coming home with me until this mess gets sorted out. But the baby will be fine. We've been raising babies in the Martinez family for generations, without marble bathrooms and trust funds. You just worry about staying healthy." That evening, as Sophia lay in her hospital bed, she scrolled through social media and discovered that Elena Cross had posted a photo of herself at a press conference for Richard's company. She was standing beside him, her pregnancy clearly visible in a designer dress, her hand resting protectively on her belly. The caption read, "So proud to support the amazing team at Black Tech Solutions as we prepare for our IPO. Exciting times ahead." Elena wasn't hiding anymore. She was positioning herself as Richard's new partner, both professionally and personally, while Sophia was painted as the unstable ex-wife who couldn't handle her husband's success. The comments on the post were devastating. People who had attended Richard and Sophia's wedding, who had sent congratulations when they announced their pregnancy, were now posting supportive messages for Richard and Elena. "She's glowing. You two make such a beautiful couple. So happy Richard found someone who truly understands his vision. Good luck with your new family." Sophia's social media profiles had been overwhelmed with cruel comments and messages calling her a crazy ex-wife and worse. Someone had leaked details of her hospitalization, her restraining order, and her mother's working-class background in Phoenix. The narrative being constructed was clear. Richard Blackwood, brilliant tech entrepreneur, had been trapped in a marriage with an unstable woman who couldn't handle his success. Elena Cross, young and supportive in carrying his child, represented his chance at happiness. Sophia's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Stop fighting this. Richard never loved you the way he loves me. Take the settlement he's offering and disappear. It's better for everyone, especially your daughter." Elena Cross wasn't content with stealing Sophia's husband and her life. She wanted Sophia to surrender completely, to accept defeat and exile without a fight. But as Sophia lay in that hospital bed, surrounded by machines that measured every beat of her heart and every movement of her child, she made a decision that would define the rest of her life. She wasn't going to disappear. She wasn't going to take whatever settlement Richard offered. She was going to fight for her daughter's future and her own dignity, no matter what it cost her. The pregnant wife betrayed by her millionaire husband deleted the cruel text message without responding. Instead, she called Jennifer Torres. "Jen, I need you to understand something. I don't care how ugly this gets. I don't care how much money Richard has or how many people he turns against me. I'm not backing down." "Good," Jen replied, "because I've been digging deeper into Richard's finances, and what I've found is going to change everything. He's not just hiding money, Sophia. He's been embezzling from his own company to fund his lifestyle and Elena's expenses. The IPO he's so excited about is built on fraudulent numbers." For the first time since this nightmare began, Sophia smiled. "Can we prove it? We're going to try, but first, we need to get you out of that hospital and somewhere safe. Richard's legal team is going to come at you with everything they have, and we need to be ready for war." As Sophia packed her few belongings to leave with her mother, she looked out the hospital window at the city lights below. Somewhere out there, Richard and Elena were celebrating what they thought was their victory. They had no idea that their perfect plan was about to collide with the determination of a woman who had finally learned to fight for herself. The heartbreaking family drama was entering its most dangerous phase, but Sophia was no longer the naive victim she had been a week ago. She was becoming something far more dangerous, a woman with nothing left to lose and everything to fight for. Moving back to her childhood home in Phoenix felt like admitting defeat, but Sophia had no choice. The house she had grown up in seemed impossibly small after 8 years in Richard's mansion, but her mother's embrace felt like safety for the first time in months. Carmen Martinez was 62 years old and had worked as a high school guidance counselor for 30 years. She had raised 3 children as a single mother after Sophia's father died in a construction accident, and she had no patience for self-pity or wealthy men who thought money made them untouchable. "Mija, you look terrible," she said, helping Sophia settle into her old bedroom. "When was the last time you really ate something?" "I eat," Sophia protested weakly. "Hospital food and takeout don't count. You're eating for 2 now, and this baby needs her mama to be strong." Over the next few days, Carmen fed Sophia homemade meals and listened to the whole story without judgment. She made herbal teas for stress, taught Sophia breathing exercises, and reminded her daily that Martinez women didn't stay down when life knocked them over. "Your father used to say that the measure of a person isn't whether they get knocked down, it's whether they get back up," Carmen said one evening as they sat on the small back patio. "Richard Blackwood knocked you down, mija, but he didn't break you." But Richard's legal team was working overtime to finish the job. Every day brought new legal documents, new accusations, new attempts to paint Sophia as mentally unstable. Richard's lawyers had hired a public relations firm that specialized in reputation management, and they were methodically destroying Sophia's credibility in both the courts and the media. The story they constructed was compelling successful tech entrepreneur married to unstable woman who couldn't handle his success. Pregnancy hormones had made her paranoid and violent. She had attacked her husband, requiring him to defend himself, then fabricated abuse allegations when confronted about her behavior. Elena Cross, meanwhile, was portrayed as the supportive colleague who had helped Richard through his marital difficulties. Her pregnancy was presented as evidence of Richard's commitment to moving forward with his life after his marriage had become untenable. The Phoenix community Sophia had grown up in rallied around her, but their support couldn't match the reach of Richard's professional campaign. Social media was relentless. Someone had created fake accounts in Sophia's name, posting inflammatory comments and conspiracy theories that made her look unhinged. Her old high school friends received messages claiming to be from Sophia, full of bitterness and rage that sounded nothing like her actual voice. Former colleagues from her marketing days were contacted by people claiming to be investigative journalists, fishing for negative stories about Sophia's professional competence. The most devastating blow came 3 weeks after she arrived in Phoenix. Sophia woke up to find her phone flooded with notifications. During the night, someone had leaked her private therapy session notes to a gossip blog. Dr. Maya Chen, the therapist Sophia had been seeing since the hospital incident, had kept detailed notes about their sessions. Someone had obtained them illegally and shared them with a media outlet that specialized in celebrity scandals. The blog post was titled "Tech Mogul's Ex-Wife's Therapy Sessions Revealed Disturbing Pattern of Delusions and Paranoia." Sophia's most private thoughts, her fears about her changing body during pregnancy, her insecurities about being replaced by a younger woman, her struggles with depression and anxiety, were now public entertainment. The comments were brutal. "No wonder he left her. She sounds completely crazy. Poor guy was probably afraid for his life. This is what happens when gold diggers don't get their way. She's lucky he's being so generous with the settlement." Most men would leave her with nothing. Sophia sat in her childhood bedroom, reading strangers dissect her mental health and judge her worthiness as a wife and mother. The violation felt almost physical, as if they had stripped her naked in a public square. But the worst part was the professional analysis included with the leaked therapy notes. A psychiatrist who had never met Sophia had reviewed her sessions and concluded that she showed signs of pregnancy-induced psychosis and posed a potential risk to her unborn child. Within hours, Richard's legal team had filed motions to have Sophia's parental rights evaluated by the court. They wanted a psychological evaluation, supervised visitation, and court-appointed guardianship for the baby. Jennifer Torres drove to Phoenix immediately. "This is bad," she said without preamble. "Leaking therapy notes is illegal, but the damage is done. The court is going to order a psych evaluation, and with this narrative already established, you're going to be fighting an uphill battle." "How did they get the notes?" "We're investigating, but I suspect Elena Cross has connections we don't know about. She's been one step ahead of us throughout this process." That afternoon brought another devastating revelation. Maria Santos, the private investigator, called with news that made Sophia feel physically sick. Elena Cross has been documenting everything, Maria reported. She's been recording phone calls, taking photos, collecting evidence for months. She recorded the conversation where she told you about her pregnancy, and she's edited it to make you sound threatening and unstable. What do you mean? She baited you into asking questions about Richard's finances and then edited your responses to make it sound like you were planning to hurt her or the baby. The edited recording makes you sound like you're making violent threats. Sophia tried to remember the conversation, but the trauma of that day had made many details fuzzy. She remembered feeling shocked and betrayed, but had she said anything that could be twisted into a threat? There's more, Maria continued. Elena has been building a case against you for months. She has photos of you following her, documentation of you researching her online, recordings of you asking questions about Richard's business. She's created a narrative where you're the unstable stalker and she's the innocent victim. The trap had been set long before Sophia even knew she was in danger. Elena Cross had been playing a game Sophia hadn't even realized was being played. That evening, as Sophia sat on her mother's couch trying to process the latest attacks, her phone rang. The caller ID showed a local news station. Mrs. Blackwood, this is Janet Miller from Channel 7 News. We're running a story tonight about your husband's upcoming IPO and the domestic situation. Would you like to comment? No comment, Sophia said immediately. We have some pretty serious allegations about your mental health and behavior during your pregnancy. This is your chance to tell your side of the story. Sophia hung up, but the damage was already done. The local news was picking up the story, which meant it would soon go national. That night, the Channel 7 Evening News led with a story about Richard Blackwood's successful tech company and his troubled personal life. They interviewed Elena Cross, who appeared on camera looking professional and sympathetic. It's been very difficult, Elena said, her hand resting on her pregnant belly. Richard is such a good man, and he's been trying to handle this situation with compassion. But when someone becomes unstable and starts making threats, you have to protect yourself and your family. Ektun, the reporter asked about Sophia's allegations of abuse. Richard has never hurt anyone, Elena replied. The police reports show that he was the one who called for help when Sophia became violent. He was trying to protect both her and their unborn child. Police reports Sophia had no memory of police being called, but then she remembered the night Richard had grabbed her wrist. Had he called the police afterward and claimed she had attacked him? The news story painted Richard as a successful businessman trying to protect his family from an unstable ex-wife. It mentioned Sophia's hospitalization for stress-related pregnancy complications and suggested that her inability to handle her husband's success had led to a complete breakdown. The story went viral on social media within hours. Crazy Tech Wife began trending, with thousands of people sharing memes and jokes about Sophia's situation. Someone had created fake quotes attributed to her, making her sound entitled and demanding. The public humiliation was complete. Sophia's private life had been dissected, her mental health questioned, and her character destroyed in the court of public opinion. But as she sat in her childhood bedroom, surrounded by the remnants of her former life, something shifted inside Sophia. The woman who had spent 8 years trying to be the perfect wife, who had sacrificed her career and her identity to support her husband's dreams, was gone. In her place was someone harder, someone who understood that playing by the rules was a luxury she could no longer afford. Sophia opened her laptop and began typing. If Elena Cross and Richard Blackwood wanted to play in the public arena, she would meet them there, but she would play by different rules, rules they wouldn't expect from the unstable ex-wife they had created in their narrative. The pregnant wife betrayed by her millionaire husband was about to stop being a victim and start being a survivor. The heartbreaking family drama was entering its most public and brutal phase, but Sophia was finally ready to fight back with everything she had learned about media manipulation during her marketing career. The war was far from over, and Sophia intended to win. At 32 weeks pregnant, Sophia Martinez Blackwood sat in a government office in Phoenix, filling out paperwork for state medical assistance. The irony wasn't lost on her 6 months ago. She had been living in a $3 million mansion, and now she was applying for Medicaid to cover her prenatal care. Richard's financial warfare had been methodical and complete. Every joint account was frozen pending the divorce proceedings. The credit cards had been canceled. Even her cell phone plan had been terminated, forcing her to buy a prepaid phone from a convenience store. Next, called the caseworker, a tired-looking woman who had probably seen thousands of pregnant women in similar situations. Sophia gathered her documents and approached the window, feeling the weight of every person in the waiting room staring at her. She had been recognized twice that morning, once by someone who took her photo while she waited in line at the WIC office, and once by a woman who loudly whispered to her companion about the crazy tech wife she had seen on the news. First time applying, the caseworker asked, reviewing Sophia's paperwork. Yes. Says here you were previously covered under your husband's employer insurance. What changed? We're getting divorced. The caseworker's expression softened slightly. I see. Well, your pregnancy qualifies you for emergency coverage, so we can get you approved quickly. Do you have a place to stay? I'm living with my mother. Good. And you're 32 weeks along. You'll need to establish care with a local OB immediately. The baby could come early with this much stress. Stress. Everything came back to stress. The leak therapy notes had detailed Sophia's anxiety about her changing body, her fears about single motherhood, her panic attacks in the middle of the night when she couldn't feel the baby moving. Now those private fears were public knowledge, dissected by strangers who had never carried a child or lost everything they thought was permanent. After the government office, Sophia had an appointment with Dr. Sarah Reeves, a local obstetrician who had agreed to see her despite the media attention surrounding her case. Your blood pressure is still elevated, Dr. Reeves said, reviewing the test results. And you've lost weight since your last visit. That's concerning at this stage of pregnancy. I haven't had much appetite. Sophia, I need to be direct with you. The stress you're under could trigger premature labor. Your body is operating in crisis mode, and that's not sustainable for another 8 weeks. What am I supposed to do? I can't control what's happening in my life right now. You can control how you respond to it. Have you considered therapy? Sophia almost laughed. My therapy notes were leaked to the media and used against me in court. I'm not sure I trust the confidentiality of therapeutic relationships anymore. I understand your hesitation, but there are therapists who specialize in high-conflict divorce situations. They understand the legal implications and take extra precautions with documentation. That afternoon, Sophia found herself in the office of Dr. Maya Chen, a psychiatrist who specialized in trauma therapy for women. Dr. Chen's office was small and comfortable, a stark contrast to the sterile elegance of the specialists Sophia had seen during her marriage. I've reviewed your case, Dr. Chen said gently. What was done to you, the leak of your private therapy notes, was a serious violation. It was also illegal, and the therapist who originally treated you is facing professional sanctions. It doesn't matter. The damage is done. The damage to your reputation may be done, but the damage to your psyche doesn't have to be permanent. You've been through severe trauma, Sophia, your husband's betrayal, the discovery of his affair, the financial abuse, the legal manipulation, the public humiliation. These are all forms of psychological warfare designed to break you down. They succeeded. Did they? You're here, aren't you? You're fighting for custody of your daughter. You haven't given up. Dr. Chen introduced Sophia to EMDR therapy, a technique for processing trauma that helped reduce the emotional charge of painful memories. Over the next several sessions, Sophia began to work through not just the recent betrayals, but years of subtle emotional manipulation she hadn't recognized at the time. Richard's control was incremental, Dr. Chen explained. He isolated you from your career, your friends, your family. He made you financially dependent. He trained you to seek his approval and fear his disapproval. The affair and the abuse were just the final stages of a pattern that had been building for years. Between therapy sessions, Sophia spent her time researching. Her marketing background made her naturally curious about how narratives were constructed and how public opinion was shaped. She began to understand the sophisticated campaign that had been waged against her. The leaked therapy notes weren't random. They had been strategically released to coincide with key court filings. The social media attacks followed patterns consistent with professional reputation management firms. Even the timing of Elena's media appearances had been carefully orchestrated to maximize damage to Sophia's credibility. "They're treating this like a political campaign," Sophia told Jennifer Torres during one of their strategy sessions. "Elena isn't just Richard's mistress. She's running his public relations." "We've reached the same conclusion," Jen replied. "Elena Cross has connections to a PR firm that specializes in corporate crisis management. They've handled several high-profile divorce cases where wealthy men needed to manage negative publicity. So this is what she does. She breaks up marriages for a living. It's looking that way. We're investigating two other cases where Elena was involved with married executives who later divorced their wives under similar circumstances." The revelation should have made Sophia feel vindicated, but instead it made her angrier. She and her daughter were just collateral damage in Elena's professional advancement. That night, alone in her childhood bedroom, Sophia made a decision that would change everything. She opened her laptop and began to write. Not a legal document or a press release or a response to the attacks against her. She wrote her story, from the beginning, in her own words. She wrote about the young marketing executive who had fallen in love with a charming entrepreneur, about the woman who had gladly given up her career to support her husband's dreams, about the fertility struggles, the pregnancy that felt like a miracle, and the ultrasound appointment where her world had collapsed. She wrote about the bruises on her wrist, the offshore accounts, the jewelry receipts, and the phone call from a pregnant mistress who spoke as if she were doing Sophia a favor. She wrote about the hospital bed where she had learned that her husband was already planning her destruction, and the moment she realized that the man she had loved for 8 years had never really existed. But most importantly, she wrote about the daughter growing inside her, and the promise she had made to protect them both. When she finished, the blog post was 3,000 words long. It was raw, honest, and completely different from the narrative that had been constructed about her in the media. Sophia created a simple blog on a free platform and published the post with the title, "My name is Sophia Martinez, and this is my truth." She shared it on her social media accounts, sent the link to the few friends who had remained loyal, and then she waited. Within 6 hours, the post had been shared 10,000 times. Within 12 hours, it had been picked up by major news outlets. Within 24 hours, Sophia's phone was ringing constantly with interview requests. But more importantly, it was ringing with calls from other women who had been through similar experiences. "I went through the same thing 15 years ago," one woman said. "They made me look crazy too, but I survived, and so will you." "My ex-husband used the same tactics," said another. "Thank you for speaking out. You're giving voice to women who never had the courage." The response wasn't universally positive. Richard's supporters attacked the blog as manipulation and attention-seeking. Elena Cross appeared on a morning talk show to express her concern for Sophia's mental health and her decision to exploit her pregnancy for sympathy. But something had shifted in the public narrative. The one-sided story of the crazy ex-wife was being challenged by a more complex truth, and people were beginning to ask questions about the wealthy man who seemed to have unlimited resources to destroy his pregnant wife's reputation. Most importantly, other people began to investigate Elena Cross independently. Social media users discovered her previous marriages, her pattern of targeting wealthy men, and the suspicious timing of her various relationships. The professional mistress who had seemed so untouchable was suddenly facing scrutiny of her own. 2 weeks after Sophia published her blog post, Maria Santos called with breakthrough news. "We found it," she said excitedly. "The connection we've been looking for. Elena Cross isn't just working with a PR firm. She owns part of it. This whole operation, targeting wealthy men, breaking up their marriages, and managing the publicity. It's a business model. Can we prove it? We're working on it. But Sophia, there's something else. Richard's company is in trouble. The IPO has been delayed indefinitely because the SEC is investigating irregularities in their financial reporting. For the first time in months, Sophia smiled. What kind of irregularities? The kind that suggest Richard has been embezzling from his own company to fund his lifestyle and Elena's expenses? The kind that could result in criminal charges? The pregnant wife betrayed by her millionaire husband was about to become something far more dangerous, a woman who had found her voice and learned to use it. The heartbreaking family drama was entering its final phase, but Sophia was no longer just a victim fighting for survival. She was a survivor fighting for justice, and she was winning. The call came at 6 in the morning on a Tuesday in October. Sophia was 36 weeks pregnant and had barely slept, her daughter seemingly determined to practice soccer moves against her ribs all night long. The phone number was unfamiliar, but Sophia had learned to answer every call since her blog post had gone viral. Mrs. Blackwood, this is Agent Sarah Rodriguez with the Securities and Exchange Commission. We need to talk. Sophia sat up in bed, suddenly wide awake. About what? About your husband's company and some financial irregularities we've discovered. Can you meet us today? 3 hours later, Sophia sat in a conference room at the Phoenix FBI field office, surrounded by federal agents and forensic accountants who treated her like a key witness rather than a victim. The transformation was startling. Agent Rodriguez was a woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and the kind of confidence that came from years of putting wealthy criminals in prison. She laid out financial documents across the table, like cards in a poker game. BlackTech Solutions has been operating essentially as Richard Blackwood's personal bank account, Agent Rodriguez explained. Money goes in from investors and clients, and then gets diverted to shell companies, offshore accounts, and personal expenses. Including Elena Cross's expenses, Sophia asked. Elena Cross has received over $2 million in payments disguised as consulting fees over the past 18 months. She's been paid more than most corporate executives for doing essentially nothing. David Kim, the forensic accountant Jennifer Torres had hired, was also present. He had been working with the federal investigators to trace Richard's financial crimes. Your husband is smart, but he got sloppy, David explained. He used company funds to buy Elena's apartment, her car, her jewelry, even her medical expenses for the pregnancy. He created false invoices and fake contracts to justify the payments. What does this mean for the divorce case? Agent Rodriguez leaned forward. It means your husband is facing federal charges for securities fraud, wire fraud, and embezzlement. It also means that all those assets he's been hiding from you were purchased with stolen money. The irony was stunning. Richard had been portraying himself as a successful businessman betrayed by his unstable wife. But he was actually a criminal who had been stealing from his own company to fund his affair. There's more, Agent Rodriguez continued. Elena Cross isn't just a passive beneficiary of Richard's crimes. She's been actively involved in the embezzlement scheme. She created the shell companies, managed the offshore accounts, and helped Richard fabricate the financial documents. So she's going to be charged too. We believe so. But Elena Cross has a history of cooperation with law enforcement when her own interests are threatened. She's already reached out to us through an attorney, suggesting she might be willing to testify against Richard in exchange for a plea deal. The woman who had destroyed Sophia's marriage was now preparing to destroy Richard as well. Elena Cross was exactly what Sophia had suspected, a professional predator who moved from victim to victim, leaving destruction in her wake. Over the next few days, the story exploded across financial news networks. BlackTech Solutions' IPO was officially canceled. The company's board of directors fired Richard and froze all his corporate accounts. Several major clients canceled their contracts, and employees began leaving for other companies. But the personal fallout was even more dramatic. Elena Cross, facing potential federal charges, had indeed decided to cooperate with prosecutors. Through her attorney, She revealed that Richard had been planning this scheme for over 2 years, systematically stealing from his company while building his relationship with her. More damaging still, Elena admitted that she had been recording conversations with Richard throughout their relationship. The federal investigators now had hours of audio recordings where Richard discussed hiding assets from Sophia, manipulating the divorce proceedings, and using Elena to destroy his wife's credibility. The recordings painted a picture of a man who viewed his wife as an obstacle to be eliminated rather than a person to be respected. Richard spoke about Sophia with casual cruelty, calling her gullible and useless, and joking about how easy it had been to manipulate her for years. Jennifer Torres called Sophia with an update that felt like vindication. "The federal charges change everything," Jen explained. "All those assets Richard was hiding, they're being seized as part of the criminal investigation. The house, the cars, the offshore accounts, even Elena's apartment. Everything purchased with stolen money belongs to the victims of his fraud." "What does that mean for me?" "It means you're not just Richard's ex-wife anymore. You're a victim of his crimes, and you have rights under federal restitution laws. You could recover far more in restitution than you ever would have in a divorce settlement." But the best news was yet to come. Elena's cooperation with federal investigators had revealed the full scope of Richard's manipulation campaign against Sophia. Elena had provided recordings, emails, and documents showing how they had orchestrated the leak of Sophia's therapy notes, the false police reports, and the social media attacks. "Everything they did to you was planned and coordinated," Jen explained. "The restraining orders, the custody challenges, the public humiliation, all of it was designed to break you down and make you accept whatever settlement Richard offered. Can we use this in the custody case? Better than that, the family court judge has reviewed the federal evidence and dismissed all of Richard's motions. The restraining orders have been vacated, the custody challenges have been thrown out, and Richard's parental rights are now being questioned." For the first time in months, Sophia felt something she had almost forgotten: hope. The federal investigation moved quickly. Within 2 weeks, Richard Blackwood was arrested at his office and charged with multiple felonies. The images of him being led away in handcuffs made the front page of newspapers across the country. Elena Cross was arrested the same day, though she was released on bail pending her cooperation with prosecutors. The local news stations that had previously portrayed Sophia as an unstable ex-wife now scrambled to interview her as the victim of an elaborate criminal conspiracy. The narrative had completely reversed. "How does it feel to be vindicated?" asked Janet Miller, the same reporter who had ambushed Sophia months earlier. "It doesn't feel like vindication," Sophia replied carefully. "It feels like justice, not just for me, but for all the women who have been systematically destroyed by men who have the resources to manipulate the legal system and the media." Sophia's blog, which she had continued updating throughout the investigation, became a resource for other women facing similar situations. She wrote about recognizing the signs of financial abuse, understanding legal manipulation tactics, and finding the strength to fight back against seemingly impossible odds. The response was overwhelming. Women from across the country shared their own stories of wealthy ex-husbands who had used their resources to destroy them in divorce proceedings. Lawyers began reaching out, offering to represent similar cases pro bono. Journalists started investigating other high-profile divorces where women had been painted as unstable while their husbands' crimes were overlooked. But perhaps the most satisfying response came from Richard himself, through his attorney. Richard Blackwood requested a meeting with Sophia to discuss a potential plea agreement that would require her cooperation. The meeting took place in the federal building in Phoenix, with Sophia's attorney, federal prosecutors, and Richard's legal team present. Richard looked nothing like the confident millionaire who had grabbed her wrist in their dining room 9 months ago. He was pale, thin, and wore an Orange County jail jumpsuit. "Sophia," he said when she entered the room, "I want you to know how sorry I am. I never meant for things to go this far." But Sophia was no longer the woman who had once sought his approval. The months of betrayal, manipulation, and public humiliation had burned away everything soft and naive about her. "You're not sorry for what you did, Richard. You're sorry you got caught. The federal prosecutors want me to cooperate in other cases, to help them identify other executives who might be engaged in similar schemes. If I cooperate, I might avoid a lengthy prison sentence." "What does that have to do with me?" "They want you to support my cooperation agreement, to make a statement about how my actions affected you and our family. Your word carries weight now, especially after everything you've been through." Sophia looked at the man who had once been her husband, who was now asking her to help him avoid the full consequences of his crimes. "No," she said simply. "Sophia, please, think about our daughter. She needs her father. Our daughter needs to grow up knowing that actions have consequences, that people who steal and lie and manipulate others face justice for their crimes, that women don't have to accept abuse just because their abusers are wealthy and charming." Richard's face hardened, revealing glimpses of the man who had tried to destroy her reputation and steal her child. "You're making a mistake. I could have given you everything. Now you'll have nothing." But Sophia smiled as she stood to leave the room. "I have everything that matters. Richard, I have my daughter, my integrity, and my freedom. You have nothing but the consequences of your choices." As Sophia walked out of the federal building, 8 months pregnant and finally free from the man who had tried to destroy her, she felt her daughter kick strongly inside her. The pregnant wife betrayed by her millionaire husband had become something far more powerful, a survivor who had learned to fight for herself and others. The heartbreaking family drama was nearing its conclusion, but Sophia's story was just beginning. The courtroom was packed with reporters, federal agents, and supporters who had followed Sophia's story since her blog post had gone viral 6 months earlier. At 38 weeks pregnant, Sophia could barely fit behind the plaintiff's table, but she insisted on being present for Richard's sentencing hearing. Judge Patricia Hernandez had a reputation for tough sentences in white-collar crime cases, and she had clearly studied every detail of Richard Blackwood's case. "Mr. Blackwood," Judge Hernandez began, "in 30 years on the bench, I have rarely seen such a calculated and comprehensive scheme to defraud investors while simultaneously destroying an innocent woman's life and reputation." Richard sat beside his attorney, wearing a gray suit that made him look smaller than Sophia remembered. The federal investigation had revealed crimes totaling over $15 million, money that had been stolen from investors, employees, and clients of Black Tech Solutions. "The evidence shows that you didn't just steal money," Judge Hernandez continued. "You used that stolen money to fund an elaborate campaign of psychological warfare against your pregnant wife. You leaked her private therapy records, filed false police reports, and coordinated a media campaign designed to destroy her credibility and take custody of your unborn child." Elena Cross was scheduled to be sentenced the following week. Her cooperation with federal prosecutors had revealed additional victims and crimes, but it had also exposed her own role as more than just a mistress. She had been Richard's co-conspirator in both the financial crimes and the campaign against Sophia. "Mrs. Blackwood," Judge Hernandez said, looking directly at Sophia, "would you like to make a victim impact statement?" Sophia rose carefully, her hand on her belly to steady herself. The courtroom fell silent as she approached the podium. "Your Honor, 8 months ago, I was a different person. I was a woman who had spent years making myself smaller so that my husband could seem larger. I believed that my job was to support his success, even at the cost of my own identity and dreams." Sophia's voice was steady, strengthened by months of therapy and the support of women who had shared similar experiences. "Richard Blackwood didn't just steal money from his investors. He stole years from me. He stole my confidence, my reputation, and very nearly my sanity. He tried to steal my daughter before she was even born." She turned to look directly at Richard, who was staring at his hands. "But what he didn't understand is that women are stronger than he gave us credit for. Every attempt to break me down only made me more determined to survive and protect my child. Every lie he told about me only made me more committed to telling the truth." Sophia's supporters in the courtroom began to murmur their agreement, but she continued, I'm not asking for revenge, Your Honor. I'm asking for justice. Not just for me, but for all the women who have been systematically destroyed by men who have the money and power to manipulate the legal system. Richard Blackwood should face the full consequences of his crimes, so that other women know they don't have to accept abuse just because their abusers are wealthy. When Sophia returned to her seat, Judge Hernandez nodded approvingly. Mr. Blackwood, you are sentenced to 12 years in federal prison, followed by 3 years of supervised release. You are ordered to pay $15.3 million in restitution to the victims of your fraud, with priority given to Mrs. Blackwood and your unborn child. Richard's face went white. His attorney had negotiated for a much shorter sentence, but Judge Hernandez had clearly been influenced by the evidence of domestic abuse and psychological manipulation. As the bailiffs led Richard away in shackles, he looked back at Sophia one last time, but she wasn't looking at him. She was focused on her future, not her past. Outside the courthouse, reporters crowded around Sophia and Jennifer Torres. How does it feel to see your ex-husband sentenced to 12 years in prison? One reporter asked. It feels like justice, Sophia replied. Not just for me, but for every woman who has been told she's crazy for recognizing abuse, who has been made to feel small so that her abuser could feel powerful. What's next for you? Sophia smiled, her hand resting on her belly. I'm going to have this baby, and then I'm going to build the life I always wanted but was too afraid to pursue. That afternoon, Sophia attended her final prenatal appointment with Dr. Reeves. Your blood pressure is completely normal for the first time since I've been treating you, Dr. Reeves observed. The baby looks perfect, and you look healthier than I've seen you in months. I feel different, Sophia admitted. Stronger. Like I remember who I used to be before I started defining myself through someone else's expectations. Trauma can either break us or transform us, Dr. Reeves said. You chose transformation. 2 days later, Sophia woke up at 4 in the morning with contractions. By noon, she was holding her daughter in her arms, looking into dark eyes that seemed wise beyond their minutes on earth. Hello, Isabella, Sophia whispered. I'm your mama, and I promise you're going to grow up knowing how strong women can be. Carmen Martinez sat in the hospital chair beside her daughter's bed, tears streaming down her face as she held her granddaughter. She's beautiful, mija. Perfect. She's free, Sophia said. That's the most important thing. She'll never know what it's like to be trapped by someone else's expectations. The next morning, Sophia's hospital room was filled with flowers and cards from supporters across the country. Women who had followed her story sent gifts for the baby and messages of encouragement for Sophia's future. But the most meaningful visitor was Jennifer Torres, who arrived with a briefcase full of legal documents. The restitution is being processed, Jen announced. The federal government has seized all of Richard's assets, including the house, and you'll receive the full $15 million over the next several years. $15 million, Sophia was stunned. Plus the house, which you can choose to keep or sell. And Sophia, there's something else. 3 other women have come forward with similar stories about Elena Cross. She's been running this scheme for years, targeting wealthy married men and helping them hide assets while destroying their wives. What happens to her? She's facing additional charges. But more importantly, you've started something bigger than just your own case. Law enforcement agencies are now looking at domestic abuse and financial fraud as connected crimes. They're training prosecutors to recognize the patterns you experienced. Over the next few weeks, as Sophia recovered and bonded with her daughter, she received dozens of calls from women who were facing similar situations. Some were in the early stages of discovering their husbands' betrayals. Others were in the middle of custody battles with wealthy ex-husbands who were using their resources to destroy them. Sophia found herself becoming an unofficial counselor and advocate, sharing the strategies that had helped her survive and ultimately prevail. The most important thing is to document everything, she would tell them. Take pictures, save emails, record conversations where legal. Don't let them convince you that you're crazy for noticing their lies. What if I don't have the money to fight back? Find organizations that help women in your situation. Contact the media if necessary. And remember that the truth has its own power, even when it seems like money and influence are winning. 3 months after Isabella's birth, Sophia made a decision that would define the next chapter of her life. She used part of the restitution money to establish the Martinez Foundation, a nonprofit organization dedicated to helping women who were facing financial abuse and legal manipulation in divorce proceedings. The foundation provided legal support, media training, and financial assistance to women who couldn't afford to fight wealthy ex-husbands who were using their resources to maintain custody of children or avoid paying support. I want Isabella to grow up in a world where women don't have to choose between their safety and their children. Sophia explained to a reporter interviewing her about the foundation's launch. Do you ever regret fighting back instead of just accepting Richard's settlement offer? Sophia looked down at her daughter, who was sleeping peacefully in her arms. Never. Fighting back didn't just save me, it saved her. And hopefully, it will save other women who find themselves in similar situations. The interview concluded with a question that made Sophia smile. What would you say to other women who are facing powerful men who seem untouchable? I would tell them that no one is untouchable. The truth is more powerful than money, and justice is more lasting than revenge. Fight for yourselves and your children because you're worth fighting for. As the camera crew packed up their equipment, Sophia sat in the living room of her new home, a modest house in Phoenix that she had purchased with her own money. It was smaller than the mansion she had shared with Richard, but it was hers. Isabella gurgled and reached for Sophia's face with tiny fingers that seemed to grasp everything about their new life. The freedom, the security, and the love that came without conditions or manipulation. The pregnant wife betrayed by her millionaire husband had become something neither Richard nor Elena had anticipated, a woman who refused to be destroyed and instead became a force for protecting others. But even as Sophia celebrated her victory and planned her foundation's work, she had no idea that the final chapter of her story was about to reveal secrets that would shake everything she thought she knew about Richard's crimes and Elena's true motivations. Isabella was 6 months old when the call came that would change everything Sophia thought she knew about her ex-husband's crimes. Agent Rodriguez's voice was tense when she asked Sophia to come to the federal building immediately. We've discovered something that complicates your case significantly, Agent Rodriguez said without preamble when Sophia arrived. Elena Cross has revealed information that goes far beyond the financial crimes we prosecuted Richard for. Sophia sat in the same conference room where she had first learned about Richard's embezzlement, but this time she was holding Isabella, who was fascinated by all the official-looking people in suits. What kind of information? Agent Rodriguez activated a digital recorder. Elena provided us with recordings that Richard made without anyone's knowledge. He's been secretly recording personal conversations for years, including intimate moments with you, with Elena, and with other women. The violation felt physical. He recorded our private conversations. More than that, he recorded everything. Bedroom conversations, therapy sessions when you were on speakerphone, even conversations with your mother and friends when you thought you were alone in the house. Sophia felt sick. Why blackmail insurance? According to Elena, Richard collected compromising information about everyone in his life as a way to control them. He has recordings of business partners, investors, employees, even family members. David Kim, the forensic accountant, spread out a new set of documents. The blackmail scheme was more extensive than his embezzlement, David explained. Richard was collecting information and using it to manipulate business deals, silence potential whistleblowers, and control personal relationships. How many people? We've identified at least 30 victims over the past decade. Richard would befriend people, gain their trust, and then secretly record conversations that could be used against them later. Agent Rodriguez leaned forward. Sophia, some of these recordings involve you, and they're personal in nature. Richard has been using them to maintain control over the narrative about your marriage and divorce. The room seemed to spin, even after everything Richard had put her through. Sophia had thought she understood the scope of his crimes, but secretly recording their most intimate moments and planning to use them as blackmail felt like a new level of violation. There's more, Agent Rodriguez continued. Elena's revelations have led us to discover that Richard's pattern of abuse goes back much further than your marriage. We've identified 4 other women who were in relationships with Richard over the past 15 years, and they all describe similar patterns of manipulation, financial control, and psychological abuse. Are they willing to testify? 3 of them are. The 4th woman, Agent Rodriguez hesitated. She died by suicide 5 years ago, shortly after Richard ended their relationship and destroyed her reputation using compromising recordings. Sophia gasped, pulling Isabella closer. He killed someone. Not directly, but we believe his systematic destruction of Linda Morrison contributed to her decision to take her own life. Her family has agreed to cooperate with our investigation. The conference room fell silent as the implications sank in. Richard wasn't just a financial criminal who had tried to destroy one wife. He was a serial predator who had spent decades perfecting his methods of psychological torture. What happens now? We're reopening Richard's case with additional charges: stalking, harassment, extortion, and conspiracy to commit cybercrimes. The recordings he made constitute illegal surveillance in multiple states. He's looking at potentially decades more in prison. But there was another revelation that would shake Sophia even more profoundly. Elena Cross has also admitted that her involvement with Richard was not what it initially appeared to be. Agent Rodriguez continued. She wasn't just a mistress who got caught up in his crimes. She was working with him from the beginning. What do you mean Elena is part of a larger operation? She and Richard have been targeting wealthy couples for years, with Elena infiltrating marriages as the other woman, while Richard manipulated the legal and financial systems to destroy the wives. David Kim pulled out a chart showing connections between Elena, Richard, and several other cases. Elena Cross has been involved in at least 6 high-profile divorces over the past 8 years, David explained. In each case, she became involved with a wealthy married man, helped him hide assets and destroy his wife's credibility, and then moved on to the next target. But she was pregnant with his child. The pregnancy was real, but Elena has admitted that she's not certain Richard is the father. She was involved with multiple men during the time period when the child was conceived. Sophia felt dizzy trying to process all the information. So everything she told me about Richard planning to leave me for her was designed to break you down psychologically while they completed their financial crimes. Elena never intended to marry Richard. She was planning to disappear with her share of the stolen money once the divorce was finalized. The scope of the deception was breathtaking. Sophia had been the target of an elaborate criminal conspiracy that involved not just financial fraud, but systematic psychological torture designed to destroy her mentally and emotionally. How many other women are there? We're still investigating, but we believe Elena and Richard, working with other accomplices, have targeted dozens of women over the past decade. The total financial damage is estimated at over $50 million. Isabella started crying, as if she could sense her mother's distress. Sophia rocked her gently while trying to absorb the magnitude of what she had survived. I need you to understand something. Sophia, Agent Rodriguez said gently, what you went through wasn't just domestic abuse or financial fraud. You were the victim of an organized criminal enterprise that specifically targets women like you, successful, trusting, financially vulnerable women who can be isolated and destroyed. Why are you telling me this now? Because we want to offer Richard a plea deal in exchange for information about the larger operation. But we won't do it without your consent. You've been through enough. And if you prefer to let the original sentence stand, we'll respect that decision. Sophia looked down at Isabella, who had stopped crying and was now staring up at her with dark eyes that seemed to hold ancient wisdom. What would the plea deal involve? Richard would plead guilty to the additional charges and cooperate in prosecuting the other members of the conspiracy. In exchange, his sentence would be reduced from 12 years to 8 years. And Elena, Elena's cooperation has earned her a plea deal of 3 years in prison, followed by 5 years of supervised release. She'll also be required to pay restitution to all the victims she helped defraud. Sophia was quiet for several minutes, thinking about Linda Morrison, the woman who had taken her own life after Richard destroyed her reputation, thinking about the other women who were still fighting battles similar to the one she had won, thinking about Isabella and the world she wanted her daughter to grow up in. Will his cooperation help you prosecute the others? It's the only way we'll be able to identify all the victims and build cases against the other conspirators. Then I agree to the plea deal, but with one condition. What's that? I want to address the court when Richard is sentenced. I want all the other victims to hear that it's possible to survive what these people do to us. I want the world to understand that this isn't just about money or divorce or infidelity. This is about organized criminals who systematically destroy women's lives for profit. Agent Rodriguez smiled. I think that can be arranged. 2 months later, Sophia stood in the same federal courtroom where Richard had first been sentenced. But this time the audience included dozens of women who had been victimized by the conspiracy Richard and Elena had operated. Some were women Richard had personally targeted in previous relationships. Others were victims of Elena's other schemes. Several were women who had reached out to Sophia after reading her blog, recognizing similar patterns in their own divorces. Your Honor, Sophia began. 8 months ago, I thought I was the only woman who had experienced what Richard Blackwood put me through. I thought I was uniquely naive, uniquely vulnerable, uniquely foolish for trusting someone who was systematically destroying me. She looked out at the women in the courtroom, some crying, some nodding in recognition. But I've learned that what happened to me wasn't personal. It wasn't about me being weak or gullible or deserving of abuse. It was about criminals who have perfected the art of psychological warfare against women, who use our legal system and our cultural biases to destroy us while enriching themselves. Richard sat at the defense table, no longer the confident millionaire who had grabbed her wrist in their dining room over a year ago. He looked smaller, older, defeated. I want Richard Blackwood to serve every day of his sentence, knowing that he didn't break me. He didn't break any of us. We survived. We fought back. And we're here to make sure other women know they don't have to accept abuse just because their abusers are wealthy and connected. Judge Hernandez accepted Richard's revised plea agreement, sentencing him to 8 years in federal prison, followed by 10 years of supervised release. But more importantly, the investigation Richard's cooperation enabled led to the prosecution of 12 other individuals involved in similar schemes across multiple states. Elena Cross served her 3-year sentence and was deported to her native country, where she faced additional charges for similar crimes committed before she came to the United States. As Sophia left the courthouse for the final time, holding Isabella and surrounded by women who had become allies and friends through their shared experiences, she felt something she had never expected to feel about Richard's crimes. Gratitude. Not gratitude for the abuse or the manipulation or the trauma, but gratitude for the strength she had discovered in surviving it, and for the opportunity to help other women find that same strength. The pregnant wife betrayed by her millionaire husband had become something far more powerful, a survivor who had learned to transform her trauma into a force for protecting others. But even as justice was finally served, and the criminals faced the consequences of their actions, Sophia had no idea that the final chapter of her story would reveal one more shocking twist that would connect her past to her future in ways she never could have imagined. 2 years had passed since Richard's final sentencing, and Sophia's life bore no resemblance to the desperate woman who had once sat in a government office applying for Medicaid. The Martinez Foundation had grown into a nationally recognized organization that had helped over 300 women navigate high-conflict divorces involving financial abuse. Isabella was now 2.5 years old, a curious toddler who spoke in full sentences and had inherited her mother's determination. She would toddle around Sophia's home office, playing with blocks while Sophia conducted video calls with lawyers, social workers, and women who needed help escaping situations similar to the ones Sophia had survived. "Mama work," Isabella would announce to anyone who would listen, as if she understood that her mother's work was important and worthy of respect. The house Sophia had purchased in Phoenix had become a sanctuary. It was a modest four-bedroom home in a neighborhood where children rode bicycles on quiet streets and neighbors knew each other's names. Nothing like the cold mansion she had shared with Richard, but everything like the home she had dreamed of creating. On a Tuesday morning in March, Sophia was reviewing grant applications for the foundation when her assistant knocked on her office door. "Sophia, there's someone here to see you. He says it's about Richard Blackwood and that it's urgent." The man waiting in Sophia's living room was elderly, well-dressed, and familiar in a way that made her uncomfortable. He was tall and distinguished, with silver hair and the kind of bearing that suggested wealth and authority. "Mrs. Martinez," he said, standing when she entered the room. "Thank you for seeing me. My name is William Blackwood. I'm Richard's father." Sophia's blood ran cold. She had never met Richard's father, though she knew he existed. Richard had always claimed they were estranged, that his father had abandoned the family when Richard was young. But the man standing in her living room looked nothing like an absent father who had struggled financially. "What do you want?" "To apologize," William said simply, "and to explain some things about my son that I should have told someone years ago." Sophia remained standing, every instinct telling her to be cautious. "I don't understand." "May I sit? What I have to tell you will take some time, and I think you'll want to hear all of it." Against her better judgment, Sophia sat across from him, keeping Isabella close beside her on the couch. "Richard told you I abandoned him when he was young, didn't he? He said you left when he was 12 and that he and his mother struggled financially?" William's laugh was bitter. "My son has always been creative with the truth. I didn't abandon Richard. Mrs. Martinez. I had him removed from my home and cut off from my family's money because I discovered he was a sociopath who was dangerous to be around." Sophia's heart began racing. "What do you mean? When Richard was 16, I caught him secretly recording conversations between me and my business partners. He was planning to use the recordings to blackmail them. When I confronted him, he showed me similar recordings of his mother, his teachers, even his teenage girlfriend in compromising situations." William pulled out a folder from his briefcase. "I put Richard in therapy, tried to get him help, but he manipulated every therapist and psychiatrist I sent him to. By the time he was 18, I realized he was beyond help. I gave him a modest trust fund and told him he was no longer welcome in my life or my business. Why are you telling me this now? Because I've been following the federal case against Richard, and I've learned that what he did to you was part of a pattern that started when he was a teenager. The same pattern I failed to stop when I had the chance." William opened the folder and showed Sophia photographs, documents, and what appeared to be surveillance reports. "I've been having Richard monitored for years," he admitted. "Not out of love, but out of responsibility. I knew he was dangerous, and I wanted to be aware of what he was doing so I could intervene if necessary." "You knew he was abusing women, and you didn't stop him." "I tried to stop him several times, but Richard is very good at covering his tracks and manipulating the legal system. Every time I gathered enough evidence to expose him, he would disappear for a while and resurface somewhere else with a new identity or a new scheme." Sophia felt sick. How many women could you have saved if you had done more? That's a question that haunts me every day. But Mrs. Martinez, I'm not here to ask for your forgiveness. I'm here to warn you. Warn me about what Richard is in prison. William's expression grew darker. Richard has a son. You mean the baby Elena was carrying? No, that child wasn't Richard's. I mean the son he had 15 years ago with a woman named Catherine Walsh. A son he's been grooming to follow in his footsteps. Sophia's world tilted sideways. What? Richard Jr. is now 23 years old, and he's been carrying out schemes similar to his father's while Richard has been in prison. He's been using different names, different identities, but the pattern is the same: target wealthy women, gain their trust, and then systematically destroy them while stealing their assets. William showed Sophia a photograph of a young man who looked disturbingly like Richard had when Sophia first met him. Handsome, charming, with the same magnetic smile that had once swept her off her feet. Richard Jr. has been asking questions about you, Mrs. Martinez, about your foundation, your work with other women, and especially about Isabella. What kind of questions? The kind that suggest he views you as unfinished business. You're the woman who brought down his father's operation, and I believe he's planning to target you for revenge. Sophia pulled Isabella closer, her mind racing through the implications. I've hired private security to monitor Richard Jr. His activities, William continued, and I've compiled evidence of his crimes that I'm prepared to turn over to federal authorities. But I wanted to warn you first, because you and Isabella are likely his primary targets. Why should I trust you? You're his father. This could be another manipulation. William nodded approvingly. You're right to be suspicious. Richard taught me never to trust anyone completely, including family members who share his DNA. He pulled out one final document from his folder. This is a trust fund I established for Isabella 2 years ago. $5 million that will be available to her when she turns 18, with additional funds available for her education and medical expenses. Sophia stared at the legal document in shock. Why would you do that? Because she's an innocent child who deserves better than the legacy my family has created. And because her mother is a remarkable woman who turned her own trauma into a force for protecting others. I don't want your money. It's not my money, Mrs. Martinez. It's Isabella's money. And unlike the assets Richard stole and hid, this money comes with no strings attached and no expectations. It's simply what she deserves as compensation for having a criminal for a biological grandfather. Sophia looked down at Isabella, who was playing quietly with her blocks, oblivious to the conversation that was determining her future security. What do you want from me in return? Help me stop Richard Jr. before he destroys more women's lives. You understand his father's methods better than anyone, and you've built a network of resources that could help identify his targets and gather evidence of his crimes. And if I refuse, then I'll turn my evidence over to federal authorities and hope they can stop him without your help. But Mrs. Martinez, you've proven you're not someone who walks away when other women are in danger. That evening, after William Blackwood had left and Isabella was asleep, Sophia sat in her office staring at the trust fund documents and the surveillance photos of a young man who carried his father's face and, apparently, his father's crimes. She called Jennifer Torres, who arrived within an hour. This is unbelievable, Jen said, reviewing the documents William had left. Richard has a son who's been operating the same schemes, apparently for years, and according to his grandfather, I'm now a target. What are you going to do? Sophia looked at the photo of Richard Jr., remembering the charming smile his father had used to manipulate her for 8 years. I'm going to stop him, she said simply. Just like I stopped his father? Sophia, you have Isabella to think about now. You've built a good life here. Are you sure you want to put yourself back in danger? Jen, what kind of world am I building for Isabella if I let criminals like Richard Jr. continue targeting women? What kind of mother would I be if I had the power to stop him and chose not to use it? That night, Sophia updated her blog with a post titled, "The Next Generation When Criminal Patterns Repeat." She wrote about the cyclical nature of abuse, about how abusers often raise children who become abusers, and about the responsibility survivors have to protect future victims when they have the knowledge and resources to do so. The post ended with a promise to Richard Jr. and anyone else who thinks they can continue the patterns of abuse and manipulation that destroyed so many women's lives. You picked the wrong target. I survived your father's crimes, and I will survive yours. More importantly, I will make sure you face the same justice he faced. Within 24 hours, the post had been shared 50,000 times. Women from across the country commented with their own stories of multi-generational abuse patterns, and several law enforcement agencies reached out to offer support for investigating Richard Jr.'s activities. But the most important response came from an unexpected source, a private message from a young woman named Sarah Chen. Mrs. Martinez. I think I'm dating Richard Jr. He's using the name Marcus Black, and everything you described about his father's methods sounds exactly like what Marcus has been doing to me. Can you help me? Sophia stared at the message, feeling the familiar surge of adrenaline that came with the opportunity to save someone from the destruction she had survived. Yes, she typed back. I can help you, and together, we're going to make sure he never hurts another woman. As Sophia began planning the investigation that would bring down Richard Jr. as operation, she looked at the framed photo on her desk herself and Isabella at the beach last summer, both of them laughing as waves crashed around their feet. The pregnant wife betrayed by her millionaire husband had become a force for justice that would protect not just her own daughter, but daughters for generations to come. But even as she prepared for this new battle, Sophia had no idea that Richard Jr.'s schemes were more extensive and dangerous than his grandfather had revealed, or that stopping him would require her to risk everything she had built in the 2 years since she had rebuilt her life. The final chapter of her story was about to begin, and it would test everything she had learned about surviving, fighting back, and protecting the innocent from predators who viewed human suffering as a business opportunity. Isabella slept peacefully in her crib, unaware that her mother was about to embark on a mission that would determine not just their future, but the future of countless other women who deserved to live without fear of predators who viewed love as a weapon and trust as a vulnerability to exploit. Sophia opened her laptop and began typing a response to Sarah Chen, the young woman who had reached out for help. As she wrote, she felt the familiar sense of purpose that had carried her through the darkest moments of her own ordeal. Sarah, you're not alone, and you're not crazy. What you're experiencing is real, and it's part of a pattern that has been destroying women's lives for decades. But here's what Richard Jr. doesn't know: his father already taught me all his tricks, and I've spent 2 years learning how to fight back. Outside her window, the Phoenix skyline glittered with promise. Somewhere out there, a young man with his father's face and his father's crimes was planning his next move against the woman who had brought down his family's criminal empire. But Sophia Martinez was no longer the naive pregnant wife who had discovered her husband's betrayal during an ultrasound appointment. She was a survivor who had learned to transform trauma into strength, isolation into community, and victimhood into victory. The heartbreaking family drama that had begun with bruises on her wrist and a photo taken in a marble bathroom had become something far more powerful: a story of resilience, justice, and the unbreakable bonds between women who refused to let predators win. As Sophia prepared to face the next generation of the Blackwood family's crimes, she knew that whatever came next, she and Isabella would face it together, surrounded by a community of survivors who had learned that the most dangerous thing you can do to a woman who has survived the worst is to threaten the people she loves. The war against those who profit from women's suffering was far from over, but Sophia Martinez had proven that, with courage, community, and an unwavering commitment to justice, even the most powerful predators could be brought to their knees. Isabella stirred in her sleep, reaching for her favorite stuffed animal, and Sophia smiled as she watched her daughter dream peacefully, protected by the strength her mother had found in the ashes of betrayal. The pregnant wife betrayed by her millionaire husband had become exactly what Richard Blackwood had never expected her: to become a woman who refused to be destroyed, who turned her pain into power, and who would never stop fighting for a world where daughters could grow up safe from the kind of men who had once tried to break their mothers. The story was far from over, but the ending was no longer in doubt. Justice would prevail, survivors would heal, and predators would learn that some women are simply too strong to break. And in the quiet of her Phoenix home, surrounded by the life she had built from the ruins of everything she had lost, Sophia Martinez finally understood the truth that had eluded her for so many years. She had always been strong enough to save herself. She just needed to learn how to use that strength. The end. This story contains approximately 20,000 words and incorporates all requested elements, SEO keywords naturally woven throughout, cultural references for American women, 35 to 65 emotional peaks and cliffhangers, therapy, and self-discovery themes, and a satisfying conclusion with sequel potential. The narrative follows Sophia's complete transformation from victim to survivor to advocate, providing the female empowerment journey requested while maintaining the dramatic tension needed for YouTube audience retention.